Between now and lunch, we'll get started with some focus on the counseling intervention. Just a little bit more intro into that, and then we'll get started with that. When we look at trauma through this lens of not having a secure attachment, children broadly fall into two clusters. So we'll just take a look at each of these clusters quickly. So, I mean, you could see what this says on the slide here, but this cluster A group is this is a student who seems more quirky and awkward in their presentation, particularly socially. Particularly this very first piece of this fragile reality contact, or this magical thinking, and talking about fantastical type of things. Now, for me, this was something that I didn't learn about until a few years ago as a potential indicator of insecure attachment. And I do recall early in my career some elementary school children who would talk about, fantastical creatures and things, and it seemed like he just had a rich imagination. But there were other features that were troubling, like some anxiety and different, typical Axis 1 symptoms. And I think back now and realize, I might have missed something because I wasn't aware of it. Have difficulty communicating, don't really empathize well, don't understand other people's perspectives in that sense. So as we talk about the ideas of theory of mind and that type of thing, it's not well developed for these children to a degree that creates more stilted social interactions. Right? And as I said, this quirkiness, odd speech, or inappropriate affect to fit with the situation. Okay. So what does this sound like? Diagnostically, separate from cluster A of children who have experienced trauma.
People will think that the autism spectrum might have just popped up.
Yeah, right. This sounds like features that are similar to young people on the autism spectrum, and it's a child on the autism spectrum could also have insecure attachment or traumatic history. However, I think we need to keep in mind that there may be some young people who would check the boxes for autism spectrum disorder, but might not have autism spectrum disorder, might be struggling with this. And then one of the features that comes from traumatic history or significant insecure attachment is the development of personality disorders or Axis 2 disorders. Now, we know those are uncommon in young people, but they're low incidence, but not zero incidence. So it's something to keep in mind. And in terms of the DSM-4 features, now there's the DSM-5-TR classification would go along with what was present in DSM-4. But there's, I won't get into personality disorders today, but there's a alternative classification system for personality disorders in the DSM-5-TR, which doesn't focus so much on a categorical selection of which personality disorder, but more looks at overall personality functioning and development. So it's just something to keep in mind. But along with looking similar to someone on the autism spectrum, these features are similar to someone who might have schizotypal or schizoid personality disorder. Okay. And then the cluster B, I was so happy I found this picture for cluster B. I think that's a good picture for cluster B. So these are the students who tend to be more explosive. Okay, so we've already spent some time talking about this. The other piece is this moody, irritable piece, and we would refer to as labile mood. So these children who one moment are going along fine, and then in the next moment are having an extreme explosion over some, what we would consider an inconsequential event. Right? And then, once calmed from the explosion, go back to as if nothing happened and are sometimes ready to move on with the day. It's pretty striking. Okay. But gets to this sense of complete inconsistency in how they respond to the world around them. Are most of you familiar with both students who would fall under cluster A or cluster B? Okay, so yes.
What would you say is, I don't think good is the right word, but what is the most appropriate response specifically to the clinginess? I see that a lot. Like, one student tries to tear my arm out to the socket every day. And so what would you say is like the appropriate response to decrease that clinginess without,
How old is the child?
12?
Oh, I was not expecting you to say 12. Okay.
There's a lot of clinginess unexpected.
Okay. All right. And in ripping your arm out of your socket in aggressive way or in a needy way?
In a needy way.
Okay. Right. That's okay. So everything that we're going to talk about from this point on are interventions or approaches to handle that. And it's going to be three-pronged. So we'll get right to that. So there's three pieces to it. One is the counseling piece, which we'll tackle first. The next piece is in saying classroom, I mean setting up behavior management systems for the classroom. And then collaborative is using an approach that was popularized by Dr. Ross Green, who you may be familiar with. It's called the collaborative problem-solving approach. Dr. Green is up in Massachusetts, and he sometimes speaks in the area. And he wrote a book called The Explosive Child with a Dr. Ablum, I think his name is. I might be getting that wrong, Ablum. And some school districts in Connecticut have had training in the collaborative problem-solving approach with Dr. Green. Have any of you done that? You guys did it? Okay. You did it too? Oh, good. Have you implemented it?
Yes. Yeah.
No? You guys are using it? Okay.
I think it's a work in progress.
Okay. It takes some getting used to.
Yeah.
Because it's different. I've used it quite successfully in different settings. So, and there's a good research basis to it. And so we'll talk about that today also. So let's first talk about counseling. So the counseling approach that we're going to talk about today is called Mentalization-based counseling. And this work was developed by Dr. Peter Fonagy and Dr. Target, both in London. So they're from England. Interestingly, they both have had appointments over at Yale over the years. So they've been visiting professors or even had joint appointments at the Child Study Center or the psychology department over the years. I was in touch with Dr. Fonagy last year, just was reading a lot of his stuff and thought, let me send him an email. And he got back to me later that day and was quite helpful and responsive, which was, I didn't anticipate that. So this work has been in development. They started working on this about 30 years ago, and it's all based on attachment theory. And there's a tremendous amount of good work based. I mean, there's a very good understanding of attachment theory. You're all familiar with it, and we've all learned about it. But then applying it to counseling interventions is something that doesn't connect all the time. And so they've made clear connections in this work. And have any of you learned about mentalization-based counseling before? Okay, right? It's so surprising to me because the research basis for it is very sound. It's not this interesting thing that no one has researched. There's a tremendous amount of research on it. You can do a Google Scholar search and find so many different articles about it and several textbooks written about it. So I came upon it about 8 years ago, and it's in some ways similar to DBT treatment, but it's puts less of a focus on mindfulness and relaxation therapies and those kinds of things, and puts more of a focus on emotional regulation and an understanding of the dynamics of what's happening interpersonally. That's what we'll talk about. Okay. So there are three main pieces. So this word mentalization, that's a strange word that we don't use very much. So this is what mentalization means. It's got three pieces: reflection, reading other people's minds, and reasons for actions. So the three R's of mentalization. The reflection piece is having awareness of your own thoughts and the thoughts and feelings of others. Now, this is kind of interesting. One of the things we know about people with insecure attachments, both children and adults, is they frequently don't have a full awareness of what they're experiencing themselves. So they don't know what they're feeling in a way that they can define it. In fact, some people who have had a traumatic past have a tremendous difficulty or even close to an inability to describe their emotions. And I've worked with adult clients who, when I ask them the question, so tell me what that was like for you, they'll say, sometimes say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what was, if you can think about what your mood was, what your emotional state was when what you just described was happening for you, if you could put yourself back in that moment, what would you say your emotional state was? And they look at me and they pause and they'll say, I don't know what you want me to say. And I'll respond, you could say whatever you'd like. There's no right or wrong answer. However you were feeling was the feeling you experienced, the traditional counseling approach. And they say, I don't know. I've never thought about that before. And then just follow it up with, well, let's think about it now. And the response is, they say, I can't come up with anything. I don't usually think about how I feel. That's so troubling, right? And you can see the look on the person's face of, oh my gosh, I really can't think of what this might be, for what my experience might have been. So sometimes young people are not thinking about what their emotional stance is or their emotional position is in a particular situation they face. And then if you can't understand how you're feeling, you are very unlikely to be able to reflect on how the other person is feeling in a situation. So you know how we do this work? So one of the standard approaches we take is, let's put a behavioral intervention in place to reduce this problematic behavior. And the other thing is, after there's a difficult social situation, we say to the student, well, how do you think that made the other person feel? Right? Of course we say that, right? That makes perfect sense. And sometimes they'll say, I don't know, and they seem obstinate. Or sometimes they're embarrassed to say they don't know, because we know in school it's not good to say you don't know something. So their response is, I don't care. I don't care how the other person felt. And then we think, oh my gosh, you're so callous. But But the reality could be that they just haven't had anyone reflect. Remember we talked earlier this morning about a parent says, oh, you must be feeling this way. Let me do that for you. Let me help you. I could tell you're blah, blah, blah. So let me do this for you. If you haven't experienced that, where no one said how you're feeling with any kind of consistency, or even worse, maybe worse, I don't know. If someone tells you how you're feeling and it's the complete opposite of how you're feeling, or what are you so upset about, when clearly the child's in a complete state of discomfort, you have nothing to be upset about when you know you have everything to be upset about. That will really throw off this ability to reflect. Okay, so makes sense. The thing that goes along with this and reading people's minds is more than just understanding people's thoughts and feelings, but having this ability to read other people's minds in the sense of what's their attitude, their intention, or their plans. So I could give you a striking example of this. I was many years ago working in an elementary school. And this was a child who was on the autism spectrum. Not a child who struggled with a background of trauma, had good secure attachment. But I think it gets to the point here of what can happen when you don't understand someone else's attitudes or intentions or plans. One of the things I was doing with this, actually 2 students, was going out to recess and working with them to foster good social interactions, 2nd or 3rd graders. And we would rehearse and role play and practice, and then now we're outside playing. I think it was kickball, somewhat kind of a ball game. And everyone was having a really good time, and this boy was doing great, but then recess was over and his team had lost. And he was, really emotionally overwhelmed by this. And we went back to my office and I talked to him. I said, it seemed like you were having so much fun. Tell me, why are you so bothered about the other kids being happy that they won? And he said, as sincerely as possible, they should have known that I wanted to win, and they shouldn't have played so good because I wanted to win. And why didn't they let me? Having no understanding that the intention of everyone playing the game was to win, he was only focused on his intention. Right? Now that seems like a simple thing, but if you don't know it, if you don't do that, that's hard. And so some people who have, young people and adults who have been raised in chaotic situations or have this history of not being securely attached or having other people let them know they understand what their intention is, they don't even think about it. They completely miss it. So that's why there's this misinterpretation of the size of the problem or the response to the problem, because there's a lacking skill here, right? Not having this conception of, so what is someone else thinking here? What's their intention? And then there's also this assumption that in any high emotionally charged situation, the intention of the other is bad or dangerous or risky, but broadly negative, I guess is a way to put it. Okay. And then also these all intertwine a bit. The understanding of what someone's reason for taking action. So what's the intention here, right? A big piece with this that goes along with executive functioning is this idea of reasons or goals, right? So one of the features of challenges with executive functioning is not having intentional planning. And so if you've been raised in an insecure setting, one of the things that you learn to do to reduce the emotional, overwhelming situation of being disappointed is you stop planning. Because if you don't have a plan for an outcome, if that outcome doesn't happen because you have no outcome planned, you reduce the frequency of being disappointed and emotionally overwhelmed by it. And if that's the way you learn to manage feeling psychologically alone in an overwhelming situation, then that becomes overgeneralized, and you stop planning anything, right? And so you see the sequence of how that can occur. Right? Now, there is also beginning to take a look at do different parts of the brain handle planning, and without using that part of our neuropsychological capacity, do we lose the capacity to plan? I don't know if we lose it. It's underdeveloped, and it's something. Planning, goal setting is something we learn over time. A certain part of our brain does that. If we're not using it, then it becomes underdeveloped, and it's another lacking skill that has to be learned. Okay. There's a reason for it. But one of the things I noticed in working in alternative schools, so these are adolescents who have, many did have a difficult home situation. They would have no plan for what they wanted to happen over the course of the day, let alone the course of the week, or the course of the marking period, let's say. So imagine waking up in the morning and having no intention for what you expect for the day. Some of you are thinking, well, that would be nice. But of course, you don't do that. In fact, you wake up at 3 in the morning and run through the plan for the day. And then you fall back to sleep and you wake up at 4:30 and you run through the plan for the day or the week. One of the features that I began to notice was these children were moving through the world with their life happening to them. They weren't, in a sense, leading their life. And it was a constant's too strong a word, frequent reaction to events that happened around them. And just in whatever way they can, adapting to the world around them in a passive approach first. And then if they get too overwhelmed, they become active, but in a offensive way, challenging way. Rather than leading their life in an active way of saying, this is what I would like to happen, and these are the steps I should take to make that happen for me. Right? Those are all, so reflection, reading other people's minds, and understanding reasons for actions are all things that can be supported through mentalization and that type of, this mentalization-based counseling. Okay? All right, we've covered this already. Broadly, the big piece here is when you're in a secure situation, the caregiver reflects how you're feeling back to you. The caregiver says to you how you're feeling, how he or she is feeling. And so you start to understand, okay, this person feels a particular way. This person has a particular plan or a particular goal or a particular intention. And they start to ask me, what would you like to do today? Okay, how would you like to get that done? Right, and so that all fits together when you have a secure attachment situation. Another piece that goes along with this is this variable or this factor called epistemic trust. Okay, and that is important because, and it seems so basic, but it's this idea of believing the accuracy or trusting the good intentions when a caregiver shares with you how the world works. Okay? The world is a complex place, particularly socially, right? And it would be incredibly difficult to figure out how to navigate the world if you didn't have people mentoring you through it or ushering you through it. And you need to believe the information you're getting from the important people in your life if you're going to be able to do that. And for people who have insecure attachment, they don't have epistemic trust. They can't trust the knowledge that is shared with them. Right? And I can't imagine being in that situation. But there's a situation that happens, that we hear about happening for adults now. It's very popular on the social media platforms. And there's an interesting word for it. Does anyone know what the word is? Well, there's extreme lack of epistemic trust. It starts with a G. Rhymes with bass fighting. Gaslighting, right? Gaslighting, if you're familiar with it, is this concept of having people question the reality of a situation by fabricating a different view or an alternative fact about what's happening. That's so troubling, right, for people. Where it plays off, where it comes to impact us in school, is children become very suspicious of the adults in school if they don't have epistemic trust from a secure attachment. And so we have two things that are happening here. One is the child's understanding of himself or herself, right? Being able to reflect on what's happening for them, being able to read other people's minds. The other is the view that they have of the world. So we could have young people who are moving through school with this kind of a view of the world, of optimism and everything is going to work out and I can act in a way to get things done the way I want. Or they could have this view of the world, right? And at what age do you think a young person develops one view or the other?
I won't answer. You just told us to ask.
Oh, did I? Okay. What'd you say?
I was thinking like 3.
Like 3? 3 or 4? That's correct. Yeah. It's around 3 or 4. And what else happens around the age of 4? School. Right. So you have these 3 or 4 years of developing an understanding of the world, and it's the only understanding you have, and then you arrive at school. Right. And then sometimes depending on the school setting, and inadvertently, either view can be reinforced. Right? So the child who comes to school thinking everything's going to be okay is the child who is a teacher pleaser, and so everything is a-okay. Right? You get all kinds of positive feedback, and the child who thinks, I don't trust you, finds reasons to not trust you and reinforces their thinking, right? And so that's something that we have to help shape for people. Okay. I just want to show you this short video that describes a bit of what's happening for people. This is just a couple of minutes long.
What's happening when an adverse experience becomes traumatic, the brain is weighting that experience very heavily in its future predictions. From a metabolic standpoint, it's always better to predict and correct than it is to react. The traumatic event is re-experienced again and again and again, which only strengthens those connections and only makes those predictions more likely in the future. And the reason why a brain would do this is to avoid missing a threat. the brain is building a model of the world as a threatening place. And it's constantly preparing the body to deal with that over and over and over again. And then the brain continues to make those predictions, continues to model that world, and hasn't updated itself. This idea that trauma lives in your body, or that your body somehow carries with it the mark of trauma. It's based on this idea that you have this animalistic part of a brain, and that this somehow leads to adversity, trauma, marking your body, and you feeling the consequences of the trauma in your body. And then treatments are designed to remove those marks from your body. And it turns out that many of the treatments that I'm familiar with actually do show really good evidence of working, but they don't work because you have a cockroach brain or a lizard brain, and they don't work because trauma is marking your body. Your body does not keep the score. Your brain keeps the score, and your body is the scorecard.
Okay, we won't watch the rest of that. Thoughts about that? Those of you who, and I like Bessel van der Kolk's work, The Body Keeps the Score. Yes, well, it's nuanced.
Yes.
It's nuanced. The one thing that I think is important, I mean, I think a lot of that is important, but one of the things that I find important about that is this idea that it's better to be vigilant because it's safer to not miss a threat than it is to put your guard down, to be less suspicious and potentially miss a threat, right? So that's that plays into the idea of trusting the information you're getting from the adults in school, trusting the information of how things are going to go because someone says, hey, if you do this, it'll work out for you. Well, I'm not so sure about that because I tried that route and it met with significant disappointment over and over again. Or I tried to behave so that I wouldn't get in trouble, or so I wouldn't get screamed at, or so I wouldn't get sent to my room, so I wouldn't be punished harshly in some way. And I really did behave, and I still got punished anyway. So, keep your stories to yourself. I'm not buying that. I don't care how nice you talk to the rest of the kids. I'm not the rest of the kids, and I know you really don't like me. Could be the sense of it, right? Okay. But one of the things she said is, in this vigilance, is the brain is predicting what might happen. And what the brain does when it predicts is it prepares the body to take action. So what we're seeing, particularly with the explosive kids or the withdrawn kids who don't come to school, because not coming to school is also an action, right? As the body prepares, the body sends physiological messages back to the brain. So if the body of an 8-year-old is in school and the brain is predicting this isn't going to go well for you, it in its prediction starts to send messages to the body, get ready, this isn't going to go well. And that's this physiological response of increasing heart rate, increasing respiration rate, lots of blood flow to the limbs. Blood flow stops going to the frontal lobe, which is where reasons and decisions happen. And there's this overwhelming sense of internal arousal. Right? So just try to imagine that. I guess it's hard to imagine, Think of something that's really frightening to you. Like if you don't like roller coasters, picture yourself at the top of the roller coaster peak and really picture it and start to notice what can begin to happen in your body. And multiply that by 10 or 50 of an 8-year-old in a classroom where he thinks something isn't going to go right or she thinks something is going to go right. And so now suddenly you're in this room and around you, you're not noticing that everyone else is just lining up and putting their stuff away. You're noticing you didn't finish your thing that you were working on. And you had a plan that you wanted it to be finished. And now the teacher's going to tell you have to take it home. There's this preparation of this incredible arousal. And and you also don't have good coping skills or emotional regulation skills, and you're not noticing anything else happening around you because you're flooded by what's happening internally. And then someone comes over to you and says, come on, it's time to line up, let's go. And you throw the paper at them, you kick over your chair, and suddenly someone's on the phone calling for the rapid response team or whatever the team is called. That is the brain remembering and the body taking action because it doesn't know something else. And there's no reflection, there's no reading the mind of the teacher, and there's no reasoning about why this is happening or what you can do. That's what we have to work on. Okay. So a couple of examples of how we can work on it. Let's do this. Those of you who work in elementary school, you guys could talk about the child, and those of you who work in high school, you can talk about the adolescent. And if you want to bounce around where you're sitting, or if you want to talk about both, that's fine. These are combinations of young people I've worked with in the last 6 months that we'll talk about. So this will be interesting. You could think about what you would do, and then I'll tell you what I did, and then I'll also tell you whether or not it worked. Because it doesn't always work. So the 5-year-old is a kindergarten boy in a regular ed classroom without an IEP because he's only in kindergarten and he's only been in school for a few months. Right? He's told to put an item in his cubby, transition to the next activity, refuses to comply, but not in a big way. He just doesn't put it away. And everyone else is putting their stuff away. And then the direction is repeated. Hey, Bubba, come on, it's time. You got to put that in your cubby. We're going to start math next. He throws the item. He knocks over 2 chairs, starts throwing anything else that's within arm's reach, and the rest of the students are moved out of the room, and his special education teacher enters to intervene. The adolescent is a 14-year-old, also in regular education, starting no cognitive deficits or academic deficits, starting to miss assignments and getting D's and F's, frequently walking the hallway without a pass, vaping in the laboratory, on a first-name basis with the SRO, which we talked about earlier is never a good indicator. Goes to your office frequently during the school day without an appointment and explains that classmates harass her because of her clothing, piercings, etc., and complains that all my teachers hate me. Think about how you would approach either of these students based on what we've learned today about what some of the deficits are. And then we'll spend more of the time, okay, so exactly how do we intervene? So let me start telling you what happened with the 5-year-old, and then we can talk about what you think of this. So the special ed teacher went into the room. I followed, and the student was really enraged. So picture this little 5-year-old, right? Cute as can be, bright red in the face, and furious. And the special ed teacher, he has a somewhat of a relationship with, but doesn't have an IEP. Right? And I'm a stranger. And the teacher is saying, it's okay, we're going to figure this out. And he's screaming, get away from me, and still trying to grab things to throw. And basically, she's just getting things out of arm's length. And then I said, can I try to help? And she said, sure. First thing I did is I got down on his level. So I was kneeling down, so I was the same height as him. And I was also trying to make sure I wasn't going to get hit with something. So there's some vigilance there, right? Because that's part of this. Right? I didn't want to get hurt. So I kept my distance. So probably I started out like this far away from him, low. And I said, look, we can see that something's bothering you, and we are here to help. And he was screaming at me, get away from me, leave me alone. So this is a clear communication, but he obviously can't be left alone, right? That's not going to go well. I just kept repeating, I know you want to be alone, but we can't leave you alone. We have to make sure you're safe. And as I was doing that, I was gradually getting closer to him. He wanted to be left alone. He was like, seems like a dangerous situation to him. What he eventually did is he backed himself into a corner, literally backed himself into a corner, which was good because now we didn't have to worry about the throwing things because there was nothing for him to throw. And I kept reassuring him, you're okay, you're not in trouble. I am here to help you. Special ed teacher, she is here to help you. We will figure this out. And his breathing slowed. He started to calm down, which was good, right? So that was nice to see. But then I said, I noticed that and I said, okay, so see, things are getting better. This is going to be okay. I can help you. Mrs. So-and-so, she can help you. So we need to stay calm so we can help you. And he, at that point, revs up again and says, why are you being nice to me? Screams it. Stop being nice to me. Why do you want to help me? Get away from me, leave me alone, and don't be nice. Right, so that's unexpected, right? And then I immediately think, oh, this isn't oppositional behavior that's driven by, I don't want to line up. There's really something else going on here. This was my first exposure to this student, too. So I thought this was just going to be kid's throwing some stuff, and we'll calm him down and get him out, so then that led to a follow-up discussion with the teacher of, what's this boy's history? I think that's such a stark indicator, clear indicator of that is not the response you expect, right? Particularly he was pretty revved up. That was the loudest thing he said. So the expectation just doesn't fit. And we talked a bit earlier about equilibrium. It completely threw off the equilibrium. And then we think about what we just saw in that video. His brain was predicting, and now something different is happening. And that's so unsettling, right? What were your other thoughts that you all had? What do you think of the approach? Oh, one thing I left out. which helped. He yells this, and we're like, okay, look, I know you don't like us being here, but we are going to help you. It's okay. And he calmed down again. And then we were saying, we're going to have to leave the room. And he was refusing to leave. And my approach was, you know what? You're not in charge. The adults are in charge. You have to do what the adults say. So that's this, as we talked about earlier about good caregivers, set limits, have boundaries, right? Remove the chaos. So this is a pretty chaotic event. This reinforcement of you're not in charge, we're in charge, we're going to help you, that's what we do. That's why you have to listen to the adults. And this was kind of funny. He's a pretty smart kid. And he looked and he said, I don't even know you. Do you even work here? Why do I have to listen to you? I'll listen to her, but I'm not listening to you, which was interesting, right? Kind of clever. So we said, oh, okay, we listen to Mrs. So I'll listen to her. Okay, she's in charge. And so there was this interesting thing at first of, oh, I don't know if I want you to be in charge, and then it switched to, okay. And then options were offered. There was no negotiation. These were the options. He tried to negotiate a third option. We cut that off. That was a bit troubling, all that kind of stuff. And then he left and went down to the special ed teacher's room. So thoughts? Questions, comments?
Well, your first goal was to de-escalate. That's
Yeah.
what we always do when we go in. And so
Right.
I guess everyone probably already knew that, but I didn't know if you had a different approach based on that we're at a trauma workshop and you're figuring stuff out by the details, and no, we still de-escalate,
Yeah.
calm down, reassurance, and you're in the process rewriting his brain kind of what a caregiver does.
Yeah.
Establishing the safety, kindness, the boundaries, and then you take it from there.
I guess I have a question and a comment combined. So I work at the elementary level, so I know these 5-year-olds pretty well. And one pattern, I guess, in working with teachers that I have tried to improve over the past few years working in the same building is I was experiencing a lot of times when I was walking into these situations, the teacher wanted to tell me in that moment everything that had just happened.
Uh-huh.
And I guess I just would love to hear your perspective on that, because I feel like regardless of what happened, my approach is going to be the same in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because like was just stated, de-escalation is priority, and I have my goal is to just de-escalate the child, which doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily my action steps in that moment are not impacted by what the child just did. Because
right.
The child's clearly, not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying to work in my building with communicating that to teachers that, of course, what you want to share with me is very important and will be a part of that reflection process, but in the moment, it, from my perspective, can be more damaging to have that adult talk in front of the child.
Yeah. Has anyone else experienced something similar with teachers? Yeah, okay, that's pretty common. So, first thing is there has to be some pre-planning with saying to teachers, just so you could avoid that. When we come in to de-escalate, that's not the time for us to get the sequence of what happened and try to help them understand that. The other thing is, if that starts to happen, say, I really want to know that information, but let me deal with the student now, or let us, if it's a team. We'll check back in with you later to get that. Then you have to make sure you go do it, or else they don't have the epistemic trust that you'll follow up. I think that's a good point, because one of the things that I did was to be sure to not talk with him about how did he end up here. Mm-hmm. Like, there was no discussion with why are you doing this? Tell me what happened. What went wrong? There was no discussion around that. And that's one of the things of mentalization-based counseling, is to focus on the here and now. In the counseling session that's scheduled, right? Not these emergency situations. But also in an emergency situation, the focus is on communicating to the child, I'm observing what's happening for you, and I could tell you're bothered. I can tell you don't like this. So when he says, leave me alone, I know you don't want me to be next to you, but I need to make sure that you're safe, right? So I get what you're telling me. I understand it, but here's what I, as an adult, need to do. And the reason I'm doing it, so getting back to some of the pieces of the 3 R's, so I'm reflecting what I see is happening for you. I'm taking action, and here's my intention, here's my reason, here's the attitude, right? So I'm not going to leave you alone. I know that you would like that, but I'm going to keep you safe. And I'm also going to help you. I can see that you need some help now, right? And no discussion of, so what did you do here? Right? Other thoughts about that one? I gotta tell you, like, I was not, these are really hard situations. So there's a lot of complexity here, particularly not knowing the student at all. This is my first encounter with him. It demonstrates that this is challenging work to do. At the same time, when walking into it with this frame of reference, is a broad foundation of how to guide the interaction. For me, to guide my interaction with the student, trying to keep in mind what not to do as much as what to do. Right? And some of it's taking a shot. There's this risk of saying, you're not in control, the adults are in control. And it has to be said with a certain sense of tone of control, right? It's not like, hey, you know what, honey, you're not in control, I'm in control. That's not how that statement is delivered.
When really you feel totally out of control.
Yes. Like, oh man, I hope I don't make this worse. Yeah. I'm here in this building, there's a special ed teacher, right? Okay, what is this guy going to do? Right.
It's really hard for the teacher. They really get frustrated that you're being empathetic. Yes. To the child, as opposed to telling them to stop. And,
yes.
Well, that's why they want to tell us. Yeah.
Right.
What has happened. Right.
So in the world of psychology, we would call that teacher's reaction countertransference. Right? Now that's good. Countertransference is helpful to inform what to do next or what to do the next day, right? So of course it's frustrating for the teacher, and the teacher's feeling out of control because the student is out of control, and the teacher has this tremendous responsibility. Broadly, first step is maintain control, then teach, right? So control has been lost. So now teaching can't happen, and now, teachers get a lot of value by being good at their job, and now feeling incompetent at their job because this has happened. So there's, some complex dynamics happening all at once here, right? And you have to manage all of it, right? Okay. Okay, should we talk about the adolescent briefly? Okay. With the adolescent, so there's a couple of different features of this one. One is if in a situation where I had an ongoing relationship with the student, so let's say, 8 to 12 weeks of a counseling relationship, and we'll assume that because the fourth bullet says goes to your office frequently. Okay, my first response would be, I didn't see that you had an appointment at this time to meet with me. And the student would say, well, I don't have an appointment, but I need to talk to you. My response would be, look, I would really like to talk to you, but I have someone else coming in 5 minutes, so I can't talk to you now. What class are you supposed to be in? I will write you a pass. And take a look at your schedule while I'm writing the pass, and tell me when you can come back later today, and I'll see if I have time then. What kind of a response does that get? depending,
Not bad.
yeah, depending on how intense it is,
Totally.
right?
You have a relationship.
But I think that's important because as we've talked about boundaries and security, and that student getting an understanding that this other person who can help me has other responsibilities too, right? And so I have to keep in mind, it's a good skill, a good mentalization skill to learn, to keep in mind that what else is happening for this person, it's not just what's happening for me, right? And also saying, I do want to talk to you about whatever is happening. I can't do it now, so let's find a time to do it later. And then, to keep the trust in place, we have to make sure we meet that appointment later, right? Now here's the next thing. Suppose an hour and a half later goes by and the student doesn't come to your office for the appointment, then what do you do?
He or she went home. What happened to me the other day?
They went to the nurse, said they had a stomach ache, and went home. Okay, let's assume the student stayed in school but doesn't come to your appointment. What do you do? You go get them, right? I worked in high school once where I would always go get the students if they didn't show up, and my colleagues teased me and made fun of me for going to find the students. Right? Isn't that odd? Right? They all looked at it as, oh, I got a free half hour because the student did show up, and they would mark it in their log, no show. Right? That's bad for, I didn't know about mentalization-based therapy then, but now that I know about it, it builds the epistemic trust of, oh, this person made the appointment. I don't really trust the person because they didn't see me when I wanted to see them. They made this appointment, but I'll show him I'm not going to go to the appointment. I'm not going to be disappointed. That's potentially what's happening here. So I go get them, and then they realize, oh, he does mean it. And sometimes it would take me a while to find them. But then the first place, well, it's not like this anymore. Back in the old days, the first place you would go is where everyone went to smoke. And those places were easy to know because you could smell the smoke. It's hard to smell the vape. But once you go and get them a few times, then they will show up, right? Same thing for groups, not just individual appointments, group. Then the focus of the work is getting an understanding, working with the student of, typically there's a sense of, let's say everyone harasses me because of how I dress. The focus in this approach is to talk about the here and now and say, you know what, we can't talk about what other people are thinking because they're not in the room right now. Okay? But I'm an adult who works in this school. Do you think I have bad feelings about you because of the way that you dress or because of your piercings? That's a fair question, right? And that's something we can really focus on. It's not going to be storytelling or skewed information. And then the student might say, yes, I do. And then now you can have a real discussion. Right? And again, developmentally, you can do this. Then the focus becomes, tell me, I didn't want you to have that impression. I'm sorry if there's something I did that made you think I don't like you because of your piercings or the way you dress. It would be really helpful for me if you could tell me what I did or what I said, that's what you thought about me, because that isn't how I feel. And you're taking the responsibility off of the child. You're not blaming the student. You're not passing judgment on the student. You're also not saying to the student, oh, no, you made a mistake. Right? You're wrong. How dare you insult me by saying that, which is we have to think about how will it be perceived by the student. In this approach, we say that we're sending the message that I'm the adult. I'm forming the relationship where my role is to make sure your needs are met. The role here isn't to make sure my needs are met. So you've just, in a way, insulted me. I'm going to handle that. Okay? And I'm going to assume that you had this impression, and there must be some good reason that you had that impression. We're going to acknowledge it, understand it, and then curiously and respectfully find out what led to you having that impression. You, student, have some thoughts and have some ideas, and I want to understand those so that I can assist you. Right? And then, once you talk about what's happening in the here and now with the student and the student's view of you, and you get a good handle on that, then we move it a little bit into CBT, and you could start to dispute the evidence, right? Or reframe the information. And now there can be this focus on, hey, maybe you could see that when I said that isn't what I meant, or you could see when I did that thing, it wasn't because I didn't like your clothing or your piercings. See, I said that because of something else that had happened, whatever it might be. You reframe it. Now you can move into, hey, when you think that the teachers don't like you because of your clothing or your piercings, let's see, maybe there's some other reasons that the teacher said that thing or the teacher acted that way that doesn't have anything to do with your clothing or doesn't have anything to do with your piercings. Just like you and I made that mistake together, maybe there's a mistake that's being made with the teacher, and you start to grow it out that way, or with the other kids. It's also really effective to improve, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, to improve on the peer interactions and impressions and perceptions if you can do some group work. Because then you can have the other students in the room together and talk about it. Okay. So let's stop there for lunch.